The Wild Boars of Madness.
Chapter 2. La Young Dad was a hunter, and their old house was built on a flat slope halfway up the mountain at the end of the village. In their home, there was an old hunting rifle that had been given to La Young Dad as a gift by the Red Army when they passed through. It had been more than 80 years since the Red Army passed through. At that time, La Young Dad was in his 20s. He led the Red Army through the rugged mountain passes for 5 days, emerging from the mountains. Before parting ways, the political commissar pulled out 7 or 8 silver dollars from his personal belongings, intending to split half of it with La Young Dad as a reward. However, La Young Dad refused and insisted on getting a gun. The unit claimed to be a regiment, but only 200 or 300 people remained. They were ragged, and the regimental commander said that the gun was not a big deal. They could keep one gun and leave behind one to plant. A correspondent brought a short-barreled Mauser rifle, made in Hankook, with a wooden stock extending to the muzzle and about a dozen bullets. The regimental commander agreed, but the political commissar said, "Wait a moment." The political commissar, a cultured man, sat on a roadside stone and carved 6 beautiful characters with a square-edged knife on the gun stock. "Da tu how fen and fight the landlords distribute land." Holding it in both hands, he handed it to Lao Young Dad. Although Lao Young Dad couldn't read, he understood what the political commissar had clearly explained. He knew it was a good thing, expressed his thanks, and left. That rifle had many stories attached to it, even involving the life of Liang's older brother. La Yang was the second child in the family, having never seen his older brother since birth and having no sisters. Still, he was considered the second child. When the People's Commune was established, the land in the village was all transferred to the collective. They also formed a militia unit, gathering the young and strong for training. At that time, Lao Young Dad was in his early 40s, robust and energetic. He became a platoon leader, and the organization heard that Lao Young Dad had a Mauser rifle. They wanted him to hand over the gun to the collective. However, Lao Young Dad flatly refused, explaining the origin of the rifle in detail. He even scraped off the clay and putty covering the gun stock, revealing the 6 characters engraved by the political commissar. "Da tu how fen and fight the landlords distribute land." The commune secretary was left speechless and let him go. The people in the mountainous area lived scattered lives, and the organization was loose. The mountain people made a living by relying on the mountains and waters. Besides the basic work points from the commune, Lao Young Dad was also considered half a hunter. Occasionally, he could go into the mountains to hunt, collect medicinal herbs, and gather fruits. All life was tight. The family never went hungry. When Lao Yang grew to be around 10 years old, a snow leopard came to the mountain. It was a white-furred snow leopard that killed the commune's sheep, bit the commune's pigs, frightened the remaining dozen or so yaks, and almost took away the commune secretary's daughter. 30 or so people from the militia unit were sent into the mountains, forming 5 or 6 hunting teams armed with knives and blunderbuss. After 10 days, they only brought back a few mountain goats for the teeth ritual, and there was no sign of the snow leopard. During the busy farming season, when the young and strong were needed to harvest crops and repair irrigation, the commune secretary pressured Lao Young Dad to deal with the problem. Lao Young Dad, carrying his rifle, a hunting knife, and a load of his own, went alone into the Huahezigu Valley. At that time, Lao Yang was still attending primary school. He had to cross 2 small mountains to reach the school on the outskirts of the town. His father went into the mountains for 5 or 6 days without any news. One dawn, his mother anxiously woke him up, saying she had a dream that his father was bitten by the snow leopard. The dream felt real, possibly reflecting the truth. She urged him to go to the village team and call for help. Young Lao Yang knocked on the door of the production team leader's house. The production team leader was a good friend of Lao Yang's family but didn't believe in Lao Yang's dream. It wasn't until the sun was completely up, and it was time to go to work, that he went to the team to shake the telephone for the commune. Shaking the telephone literally meant using an old-fashioned device with a handle to send signals to the other side. He shook it again and again until finally getting through. On the other end, they said that in the new society, they didn't indulge in feudal superstitions and promptly hung up. Shaking it once more, the response was, "Believe in dreams. You'll figure it out yourselves." The production brigade leader told young Lao Yang, "Your father won't be in trouble. Your mother is confused. Go back and talk some sense into her." Reluctantly, young Lao Yang returned home. Lao Yang's mother cried with both snot and tears upon hearing the outcome, and the news made her even more heartbroken. Young Laoyang went to the kitchen, found a firewood knife, and took out a stove stick. He stuck the hatchet into the end of the stove stick. He grabbed 2 pieces of barley noodles and put them in his pocket and headed into the mountains. In the afternoon, in a nameless ravine deep within the Huahezigu Valley, he found the slate shack where Laoyang had often stayed. There was nothing unusual inside. He then headed to another nameless ravine, arriving at Rockfall Cliff under the Bashan upland. In the distance, a group of crows circled in the sky. There was a cave, Cliff Cave, the place where Laoyang had stayed. When he arrived at the Cliff Cave, it was already pitch dark outside. Fortunately, the crescent moon was faintly visible, allowing him to see the path in front of him. In the hidden entrance of a cliff cave, concealed behind a cluster of cedar trees, the opening was just about a person's height. Normally, a fence made of birch branches covered the entrance. Inside, there was a room about the size of a bedroom. But no fence lay on the ground, and a strong scent of blood pervaded the air. Young Laoyang shouted, stumbling and rushing in. He nearly tripped over a heap of fur and skin on the ground, but luckily his sturdy stove stick saved him. Inside the pitch-black cave, young Laoyang felt around in a stone niche behind the entrance and found a box of matches. The matches were not inside an oiled cloth, indicating recent use without being put back. In the flickering light of the unsteady match, a snow leopard lay diagonally at the cave entrance. A spray of dried blood covered the ground, and a hunting knife was lodged in its neck, twisted into a deformed coil. Laoyang's father, holding a gun, sat halfway at the end of the cave, his body obscured by a mixture of blood and flesh. Young Laoyang rushed forward, shaking, and his father's body was already stiff. Young Laoyang lit the oil lamp high in the cave, dragged the Mauser rifle from his father's embrace, and wants to take the earthen cloth bullet belt off his father again. But he ran around all day, he was already exhausted. His father sat rigidly, his weight pressing down. So young Laoyang had no choice but to take out the bullets and stash them in his own pouch. By the light of the oil lamp, he checked the gun for remaining bullets, lit a pine torch, slung the gun over his shoulder, held the stove stick firewood knife in one hand. He closed the wooden fence outside the cave, secured it with a stone slab, and then went to call for help. On his way back, he took a shortcut in a different direction. After a few steps, under the cedar trees, a large expanse of black and white fur appeared, a snow leopard. Young Laoyang shouted in astonishment, but the leopard remained motionless. Approaching with a knife in hand, he saw that it was already dead, a dried pool of blood at its chest. Young Laoyang wanted to drag the dead leopard back into the cave but found it too heavy. When he saw the first leopard, he felt his father's death was unjust. By the time he saw a second one, his mood had improved. He refused to let this dead leopard be taken by jackals and falcons. Sitting beside it, he ate a few bites of barley flour, took a few sips of water from the cliff edge, gathered his strength, then, using the burning stick, levered little by little. Finally, he managed to move the dead leopard back into the cave. Feeling utterly drained and unsure if he could make it back, young Laoyang lit an oil lamp, extinguished the torch outside the cave, secured the wooden fence at the entrance with a tree branch, and lay in the grass nest beside his father. Tears streaming down his face, he fell asleep. The next morning, with red eyes, young Laoyang went back to the village to call for help. Along the way, finding the gun too heavy to carry, he took a detour to a slate shack, hid the gun and bullets beneath a broken wooden bed, layered them with miscellaneous items, and covered the entrance before leaving with a sense of relief. It wasn't until the afternoon of the third day that Laoyang's father and the 2 dead leopards were carried back to the village. Seeing the carried stretcher coming from the mountains, villagers rushed to offer condolences. They brought white cloth from their homes, covering Laoyang's father as a sign of mourning. Several elderly women surrounded Laoyang's grieving mother, wiping tears and recalling the kindness of Laoyang's father. Representatives from the commune also arrived, accompanied by a clerk with writing skills. The clerical staff approached young Laoyang, urging him to narrate in detail the heroic process of Laoyang's father killing the 2 leopards. Young Laoyang claimed he hadn't witnessed it and could only speculate that his father had set an ambush near the lake, shooting the first leopard with the gun. While carrying the dead leopard outside the cliff cave through the cedar bushes, he was attacked by the second leopard. A struggle ensued, leading them into the cave where his father killed the and the leopard with a hunting knife. Ultimately, he succumbed to excessive blood loss inside the cave. There is a legend in the commune that a leopard has arrived, but unexpectedly there are 2. Without any precautions, it would have been better if a few more people had gone at that time. The clerical staff questioned for 2 days, but couldn't extract new information, reluctantly returning and fabricating a story to report. Before Laoyang's father was buried, the Coming Secretary, accompanied by the militia captain, inquired about the whereabouts of the gun, claiming it needed to be confiscated for public safety. Fortunately, young Laoyang sensed the ulterior motives and insisted he hadn't seen it. He suggested it might have fallen into the lake or been taken away by scavengers. After a brief search in the cabinet and under the bed, the secretary left. The next day, the militia captain returned with a search party to the cave site but found nothing. They once again questioned young Laoyang, who, having become more astute, maintained he hadn't seen the gun. Even if they found it, it was a legacy from his father, a gift from the Red Army with 6 characters engraved. To how can they fight the landlords? Distribute plan. No one could take it away. The matter eventually subsided.